going to work on a lot of shoulder and upper back kind of mobility stuff. So the theme of the last couple weeks has been kind of let's do a test retest. Yeah, if you guys can put yourself on mute unless you have any questions, and that way we don't have any background noise. Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna do a test retest of shoulder flexion. So I like to do this seated mostly because people are able to maintain a better rib over pelvis position, whereas when they're standing, they tend to arch back a little bit. They tend to arch back a little bit. So what we're gonna do is sit on the ground or on a chair and then find that rib position and stack it right over the pelvis. So if the ribs were a bowl upside down, the pelvis was a bowl right side up, they'd be stacked right onto each other, creating a bit of a vacuum. From here, I want you to take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, I want you to reach both arms overhead as far as you can without leaning back or arching your low back or losing that rib position. So thumbs up towards the ceiling, and you're just going to go as far as you can without losing that position. And just pay attention to where are the restrictions. Can I get my shoulder behind my ear, which is kind of full range of motion? Is there a difference side to side? Am I getting any pinchiness? If you're getting pinchiness, you might need some treatment. And just, yeah, pay attention to what it feels like side to side and where those restrictions are. And then just, again, do a little mental note of where your range of motion is, because we're going to retest at the end today. And then I want you to do the same thing on your back. Again, making sure those ribs are stacked in the same position. And knees can be bent, and then you're just going to go as far as you can without losing that position again. Okay, and are you able to go further than when you're seated? You know, gravity's helping you out in this position, so it's a little bit more passive. So that can indicate, is this a passive issue or an active issue? And again, just take stock of what that felt like and where that ended up. All right, so we're going to start with shoulder CARs today to work on that rotational capability of the shoulder. And I want you to pay attention, again, if there was any sticky spots when you were doing the test, and how that feels when we're going through rotation. So rotation of the shoulder or rotation of any joint can create the most kind of mobility restrictions. So if we work on rotation first, it tends to ease things up a little bit. So you can do this either seated or standing or kind of kneeling, whatever is most comfortable for you. And we're going to start with a fist. And your fist is going to just relax down by the arm or down by the thigh, and we want a straight arm throughout this movement. Okay, so we want to kind of lock out that elbow, squeeze those triceps, and we're going to start with our thumb facing back. So we're going to rotate through that shoulder, and then we're going to raise the arm as far as we can before we get kind of a lock, or it won't let us go further. Once we get that, we're going to imagine kind of screwing, we're holding onto a screwdriver, we're screwing into the ceiling, and we're rotating that thumb back again. Once we're there, we're going to reach back as far as we can. Again, making sure we're only moving through the shoulder so we're not opening up through the trunk. I like to put my hand on my ribs as some feedback. And then going out through the motion. When we're down to our hip again, we're going to rotate back so that thumb's pointing backwards and do our second rotation. So going up as far as we can. Once we can't go any further, we're rotating that thumb back and reaching backwards. if you find that you have any kind of pinchiness, don't push through that kind of pinchiness, just back off a little bit and change that direction a little bit so you're not pushing through what we call closing angle pain, which is a pinch in the joint, which typically needs a bit of manual therapy to kind of get that moving a bit better again. So we want to avoid going into that pain-free range, or into that painful range, or that pinchiness. We want to keep it pain-free. Good, now we're going to work on the capsule a little bit more. So you're going to start with your thumb pointing forward. We're going to raise up as far as we can. And once we can't go any further, now we're rotating that thumb forward again as we reach back. So you might find you have a bit more range this way, or maybe a little bit less. If you have tight pecs or chest muscles, this one takes those out a little bit more, so you might get a little bit more range. And we can change the intensity of these depending on what our goal is. Okay, let's switch directions. So now we're going to start with our thumb facing forward, but we're going to go backwards first. And then once we can't go any further, that thumb comes up towards the ceiling again. And then we're going to reach around up towards the ceiling and then come back down. So if our goal is to just work on getting some movement in the shoulder first thing in the morning or as a movement break, we might want to decrease the intensity. So change how much we're squeezing our fist, or maybe no fist at all, but still maintaining that isolated position through the shoulder and not compensating elsewhere. Okay, let's switch sides. So we're going to start with the thumb facing backwards. We're going to go up as far as we can. Once we can't go any further, screw that screwdriver up into the ceiling and then reach back without opening up through the trunk. So if I was going to use this as a warm-up before a workout, I might want a little bit more intensity. So I like to imagine like a business handshake, which all we can do right now is imagine what that feels like. So I'm squeezing firmly into my fist, but I'm not crushing my fist. Okay, let's switch ways. So now we're going thumb forward as far as we can, then rotate that thumb down and back. If, like what we're doing in class right now, we want to try and use this exercise to increase mobility, then we're going to squeeze a little harder, or it's going to be a little bit more intense. So now you're trying to win an arm wrestle against the rock. So you're squeezing, 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 maintaining that tension throughout the arm. Good. Let's switch directions now. So now that hand is coming back as far as we can. Again, making sure we're not dumping forward to get more range. We're staying in the range that we can control, and then reaching back forward. You might feel some kind of like clicking or cracking. That's all normal. We're working on rotational movement right now, so it's common for tendons to kind of flick over each other or over the joint. So as long as it's not painful, keep working through that. Good. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is work on scapular mobility. So when we go overhead, our shoulder blades actually have to rotate up as well in order to get that last bit of movement. So lots of people always work on shoulder. They don't work on shoulder blade, which we're going to do today. They also are sometimes restricted in their upper back, which we're going to work on today as well. So with the shoulder blade, we're going to just start in what we call protraction retraction. So back and forth. And what I want you to do is start with your arms parallel to the ground. And again, it doesn't matter if you're doing this seated, standing, cross-legged, sitting on a chair. We just want to make sure those ribs are stacked over the pelvis. So again, we're going to go parallel to the ground, and then I want you to squeeze your shoulder blades back as far as you can without losing your rib position. And then from there, you're going to push them forward as far as you can without losing rib position. So a lot of time, people struggle with that dissociation between their shoulder blades and their spine. And so we want to keep the spine nice and still right now because we want to isolate the shoulder blades. So we're going to push forward as far as we can, hold for a second or two, and then pull back. And just pay attention, is there a difference side to side? Am I more restricted on another? Am I feeling kind of crampy? Good, once we've done a few, we're going to raise up 15 degrees. So now if I had a kind of triangle between parallel, it's about 15 to 20 degrees, and I'm going to do the same. But this time as I pull back, I want to work on that diagonal trajectory. So as I pull back, I'm also kind of pulling down, and as I push forward, I'm also kind of pushing up a little bit. So now I'm kind of on a different angle. And as you come up into more shoulder flexion, are you a little bit more restricted on one side than the other? So for me, I have some chronic right shoulder issues, and I struggle as I come up above parallel to actually get my shoulder blade to retract, which is important for what we call upward rotation to raise the shoulder overhead or the arm overhead. Okay, now we're going to go up another 15 to 20 degrees. And again, take stock. What does this feel like? Anyone getting some burning on the top of the shoulders there? Good. Okay, one more. So now we're working a little bit more vertically. Good, nice and controlled. And again, we can change the intensity based on what our goal is with this exercise. Good. Okay, shake that out a little bit. Now we're going to go into our full scapular CARs, or shoulder blade CARs, and we're going to do this in a quadruped or all-fours position. So similar to our cat camel or our bird dog, we want our shoulders stacked over our wrists, our hips stacked over our knees, and from here we're going to bring our shoulder blades together. Then we're going to pull them down towards our hips. Then we're going to push up towards the ceiling and then shrug our shoulders towards our ears. So we're almost imagining a square that we're moving. And you'll notice I'm only moving through my shoulders, so not changing where my body weight is. I'm staying stacked, shoulders over wrists, and I'm just moving my shoulder blades. Another common compensation here is to bend the elbows, so keep those locked, keep them straight. You can even rotate your elbow pits a little bit more in line with your thumbs to keep them nice and engaged. And then just work that square. Trying to find every little nook and cranny. Good, let's switch directions now. And again, take note, does one side like to move a little bit more freely than the other? Are there sticky spots? If there are, you might want to hold it for a few seconds, try to breathe through that. See if it can open up a little bit more range. Good. All right. So, we worked a little bit on shoulder control, scapular control. Now we're going to work on that T-spine extension. Before we do that, let's just do a little retest and see if you've noticed any changes. We're just going to do the active one this time. So ribs stacked over the pelvis, and then raise your arms up as far as you can without compensating. Give me a thumbs up if you got a little bit more range this time. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to work on our T-spine mobility, but we'll start with just some gentle spinal mobility through our segmental cat camel. So we're going to start on all fours. Again, shoulders stacked over our wrists, hips stacked over our knees, and we're going to start at the pelvis or low back. We're going to tilt the front of our pelvis down towards the ground, so if it was a bowl or spilling the water, that tail is coming up towards the ceiling, and then belly button towards the floor. And one at a time, we're trying to move those segments into extension. Once we get to the upper back, imagine an arrow coming through your chest and pulling that arrow and that chest through the shoulders, and head and neck come last. From here, we're going to reverse it, so chin to chest. We're going to curl ourselves into a ball, trying to bring our chin closer to our chest as we open up each segment one at a time, and then finish by tucking that tail under. So just do a couple of those on your own pace. And again, paying attention, where do you feel restricted? Is it in that upper back? Are you able to extend and pull that heart through the shoulders? One thing that's common here is, again, to use the shoulder blades to get extension. So I urge you to maintain the shoulder blade position by keeping good pressure into the hands, almost like you're pushing away. And you're not using your shoulder blades by pulling them together to get that extension. So you're really focusing on using the spinal muscles to get that movement. Good. Okay, we're going to come back to that after we do our mobility exercises. So for this, you're going to need either a stool or a chair or the side of a couch or an ottoman. And we're going to start with our hands behind our neck and elbows kind of at shoulder width apart. From here, we're going to sit back onto our heels with our elbows on the chair or the block. If this is too uncomfortable on your knees, you can do this standing as well. You'll just need a higher surface. So from here, we're just going to sink that chest down towards the floor. And you can even use your fingers to kind of like push the upper back into that extension. You might find that you feel a stretch in the triceps or even more into the armpits, into the lats. That's okay. And we're just going to lock out that lower back by sinking down into our heels as much as we can. From here, we're going to push our elbows into the bench or the chair and hold for 10 seconds. Then we're going to lift one elbow at a time, because we'll get a little bit more rotation. So if you try to lift both elbows at the same time, it's not probably going to end well. So what you're going to do is you're going to push your right elbow down to create a little bit of counter pressure, and then you're going to try and lift your left elbow up. And we want that movement to actually come through the upper back, so it's going to be subtle. We don't want any chicken winging, so we want to keep tension in the arms. The arms don't move. We're getting that extension through that upper back movement. Okay, so we're going to push that right elbow in and try and lift that left elbow up. Again, thinking about cracking a walnut, not between the shoulder blades, but between the spinal joints at the level of the shoulder blades. And relax, come down. We're going to push both elbows down into the bench again. Holding for 10 seconds. And then we're going to keep pushing that left elbow down and try to lift that right elbow up. Again, it's very subtle. You might not even get any air. Maybe you can slide a piece of paper under your elbow. But if you feel like you got a couple inches, you're either not sinking down low enough or you're chicken winging. So just double check your position. Good. Right elbow down. Both elbows pressing down. Good. Keep that right pressure and now lift that left elbow up. So we're almost squeezing everything first. Trying to get that Popeye bicep before we lift up to maintain that tension. And down. Both elbows down again. Good. Left elbow down. Right elbow up. And again, you can use your fingers here to give yourself some feedback of where you want that movement to occur. Again, it's very, very subtle. And it's about the intention. Good. And relax. Slowly come out of that. And then we're going to go back into our cat camel. And see if we got a little bit more range or a little bit more control. So just a couple reps on your own, really thinking about controlling, almost like a set of dominoes, one at a time, pulling that chest through. Now we're going to sit back onto our heels and we're going to work on that segmental cat camel, but now with a lumbar block. So we're not going to be able to move through our low back to try and get that extension. So again, when we go overhead, oftentimes if we're restricted, our ribs will pop up, and that means we're using our lumbar spine to extend versus our thoracic spine or our upper back. Okay, so we're now going to lock that out so we can't use it. And depending on your mobility, you might be up on your hands or you might be able to get down onto your elbows. So from here, we're going to do the same thing, though it's going to be a lot less range of motion. We're going to think about pulling that chest through the shoulders, keeping our head in neutral when we do that. So that's another compensation, is oftentimes people extend their head and think that they're getting movement through their upper back. So we want to keep that head in neutral, get that movement through the upper back first, and then one at a time lift the head and neck to look forward. Then we're going to reverse it again, so chin to chest. Curl yourself into a little ball here. Only going as far as you can without lifting those hips off of the feet. Good, and then reverse. So sink that chest down towards the ground. Keep that head and neck in neutral until you can't move through that mid-back any more than head and neck come up last. Reverse, chin to chest. Curl yourself into a ball. Good. And one more. So sink that chest towards the ground. Again, I'm keeping pressure through my forearms or through my hands to make sure I'm not moving through my shoulder blades. That I'm isolating that movement through that upper back. Good. And slowly come out of that. Okay, let's do a little retest. So again, we'll just do that more active one. So seated, stacked ribs over pelvis. Inhale and then exhale, reach overhead as far as you can. And I want you to think about encouraging, once you can't go any further, are you able to get that extension through that upper back without popping the ribs? Okay, so now that we've done all that isolated work, are you able to integrate that into your overhead reach? Good. Anyone got more range that time? All right. So now we're going to work on some strengthening of that new position that we have created. So again, you'll need a chair or the side of your couch. If you're having trouble on your knees, you can do this standing as well. You'll just need kind of like a bookshelf or a doorway to work into this position. So I'll demonstrate it first, and then if you have to go off screen, that is totally cool. So this time we're going to keep our arm outstretched, and you can start with a fist or just a hand, and you're going to wiggle yourself back until you get that stretch in the armpit or the back of the arm there. Okay, so again, we want to think about sinking that chest down as far as we can until we get to our end range shoulder flexion. So again, we want to stay pretty close to end range. So if I'm up here, then I have a lot of range of motion that I still have control over. So we want to keep either sinking back or walking back until I no longer have a lot of room to play with. So we want to work on end range. If you get pinchiness in your shoulder end range, back off. Okay, so we'll work in our, we'll work prior to end range if you got that pinchiness. We don't want to push through pain. So from here, we're going to do the same contractions that we did for the upper back. So you're going to start by pushing your hand down. So I want you to keep your thumb up towards your ceiling. That rotates the shoulder into a better position. So you're going to push that hand down into whatever's blocking you, holding for 10 seconds. And then from here, we're going to squeeze the whole shoulder, squeeze your hand, lock out that elbow, and then try to lift that hand off of your block without compensating. So without popping up, without rotating, you want to maintain that position. Good, and come back down. If you can, try and sink a little bit deeper. And then you're going to push down again. If you're doing this standing, make sure that you maintain your rib over pelvis position the whole time. Good, now squeeze everything, make a big fist, then try and lift that hand off the block, or the chair, or the wall. Hold, 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 and back down. One more time, try and sink a little bit deeper if you can. And push down into the chair or into the wall. Holding, good. And now you're going to squeeze and try and lift up. Again, the movement shouldn't be too much. You might not be able to get off at all because we're at end range. And relax. So if you feel like you're getting more than about an inch or two, then you're not at end range. Or you're compensating. So just pay attention to that. Okay, let's switch sides. So again, we might have a different side to side. So find the end range for this side. Good, we're going to make sure our thumb is up towards our ceiling, or if we're using the wall, our thumb is pointing backwards. And we're going to start by pushing that hand into our block, whatever that might be, holding for 10, Making sure we're breathing throughout. Good, now squeeze everything, make a fist, try and make your arm nice and long before you attempt to lift off. You can pay attention to your neck. Is it nice and long? Is it neutral? Good, and relax. We're going to push down again or push into the wall. Good, squeeze, 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 lift up. You can use your other hand or your forearm to kind of counter pressure. So you're pushing that down into the ground as you try and lift up. And relax. One more. Try and sink a little bit deeper. And we're pushing down again. Good. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Try and lift off. If you're on the wall, make sure you're not rotating through that rib cage or trunk. All of that movement is isolated through the shoulder. Good, and relax. Okay, shake that out a little bit. And now what you're going to need is some sort of block or book or even like a little trinket or your phone, something that you can kind of lift over. So we're going to do some hovers. And again, if you're, we're going to go full stomach, but if you're not comfortable on your stomach, you can do this in a standing position as well. You're just going to pay attention to kind of something that you can reach around. So we're going to go on our stomach. We're standing nice and tall, ribs stacked. We're going to place our object just at kind of the top of the hand here, so we can think about lifting over and back down. Okay, the higher or the more limited your shoulder flexion is, the lower you want your object to be. Okay, so it can even just be like a pen or a pencil on the ground. A block is going to demand more shoulder flexion to reach over without compensation. So you might have to play around a little bit to find the right object for you. So you can rest your forehead on your opposite hand. We'll start on the right side, nice and outstretched. Again, you can make a fist if you are, if you struggle to maintain tension. And then from here, we're going to keep a lot of tension on our body, so kind of squeeze the bum, pull those ribs towards the pelvis, and then try and lift up the arm and reach over our object and control it to the other side. Okay, so we're squeezing, 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 we're lifting up, we're reaching over and controlling to the other side. So if you're not able to reach over without kind of rolling or lifting your upper back off the ground, then try to find a lower object. If you're getting lots of air, try and find a higher object so you can really challenge that end range. Okay, so we'll just do a couple on your own. Squeezing, 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 maintaining that tension as you reach over. And we want this, depending on where your shoulder flexion is limited, you can change the angle as well. So if we're really wanting to work on right overhead, then we want the block to be in line with our shoulder as we're overhead. If that's too challenging for you right now, you can work at more of like a 30 to 40 degree angle and trying to increase that range there before reaching all the way overhead. So find what works for you, and just a couple reps back and forth, really making sure we're squeezing first. If we don't squeeze, then we're going to compensate elsewhere, and we're not going to be focusing on solely the shoulder joint. couple more. Make sure you're breathing throughout. Good, let's switch sides. And again, as we've gone throughout the class, you might have a different side to side, so your object or your placement might have to be different on the side. Maybe you have a little bit more range, so you need to increase it. Maybe you have a little bit less, so you need to decrease it. But same concept, we want to squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Want to lift, so I have more range on this side, so I might turn my block. So I'm challenging myself a little bit more. Good. Again, the harder we squeeze, the more intense it's going to be. So right now we're in mobility class. We want it to be intense, but we want to keep it pain-free. Good. Be aware, are you compensating with your neck? Are you able to keep it nice and long, a little chin tuck? Good. A couple more. Good. Okay, now we're going to work through some rotational mobility exercises for the shoulder. You can either stay down on the ground for this one. We're going to do some swimmer hovers, or you can come up to seated or standing. Again, we want to keep those ribs over the pelvis. We're going to start with our hands behind our back. And if you're not able to get this without dumping forward, just start with your hands on your hips. Okay, so we want to actively pull the shoulder blades back. From here, we're going to try and lift the hands off the back or off the side of the hips as far as we can without losing our spinal position. From here, we're going to straighten those elbows out, and then we're going to rotate those thumbs up towards the ceiling, but keeping those shoulders pulled back. Then we're going to arc the hands up towards the ceiling, up towards each other, and then once we're at kind of like a Y position, we're going to bend those elbows again and try to reach those fingertips together behind the head. Okay, from here we're going to reverse it. So we're going to straighten the arms, we're going to reach down, we're going to rotate those thumbs down, pulling those shoulder blades back together, and then bending the elbows almost like you're getting arrested, handcuffs behind the back. Okay, so a couple of those on your own. Always thinking about reaching back as far as you can without those ribs popping up versus letting the arms kind of come forward where they're more comfortable. So stay in that range where we're challenging our mobility. Like I said, you can do this on your stomach, you can do it standing, you can do it seated, whatever works best for you. It is quite difficult to do it on your stomach if you're limited in range, because the floor is going to get in the way. So the floor is a nice kind of constraint if you're able to get there. If you don't have the floor, you have to kind of actively think, okay, am I pulling back? Imagine something's in the way here and you're trying to reach around it. Good. All right, shake that out. We are going to integrate some of that together with a low bear to high bear. So we're going to start on our all fours again. So now we're going to eccentrically load into shoulder flexion. So you're going to tuck your toes under. You're going to gently lift your knees up without changing your spinal position. So this is our low bear. To get to high bear, we're going to really spread the fingers and actively push through the hands to raise our hips up towards the ceiling. Okay, knees are staying bent, so So all that movement's actually coming through the shoulders. And then come back down. Push away again. It's almost like I'm pushing the floor away from me. Hips come up towards the ceiling. And then control back down. We'll do one more. So push away. Again, everything's in the shoulder. Head and neck stay nice and long. And then coming back down. All right, let's do our final test. So, again, we're standardizing it by making sure our ribs are stacked over our pelvis. And then we're reaching overhead as far as we can without those ribs popping up. So I got quite a bit more range, but I still have a different side to side. My right side still pinches a little bit. Need to go get some treatment for that. Did anyone else increase range over the class? Good stuff. And then let's try the passive one again. So on our backs, knees bent, ribs stacked over the pelvis so we're not popped up. Arms straight up, and then as you exhale, try to reach overhead. Can you find a bit more range? Is it a little bit more relaxed, less pinchy? You can just do a couple reps there to integrate all the good work that you've done today. All right. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys. So for today and the month of June, donations are being accepted towards Victoria Literacy Connection Society, and there's a link to the GoFundMe page. You can donate anytime if you're able. If you're not able to contribute at this time, that's okay too. I thank you for joining me and hope to see you next week.